Okay, we're still looking at the election of the president. So grab two cards. 5.12 Electoral College impact. This should be kind of review, maybe a little bit of extra different take on it. But we've already talked about the Electoral College, but I just want to talk about impact on presidential election. Like, how does it impact how they campaign is really what we're looking at here. All right, so flip over to the backside. Each state, remember, gets 2 electoral votes for its senators, so minimum of 2, plus the number of House members. So the minimum of 2 senators plus 1 minimum House member means that 3 is the guaranteed number every state has. The lowest number a state can have is 3. And so you look at the map here and you see Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota. DC was actually a constitutional amendment that allowed DC to have 3 electoral votes, even though it actually isn't a state. And then Vermont, a few other places like Delaware have only 3. So that's something to remember. Okay, that's how we determine that. So the bigger the state, the more electoral votes it has. So look at Texas and California and Florida. Huge numbers. And then we already talked about the fact that during reapportionment, that means that states that grew are going to gain seats, and states that got smaller or lost population are going to get fewer electoral votes. And most of those states come in the Midwest area. And then New York, of course, might lose 2 or 3 seats, and Texas may gain 2 or 3 seats. All right, so that's kind of how that system works. Here's the big part. Second bullet point is that almost all the states except 2 are winner take all. So if you win the state with a plurality, meaning that you didn't get 50% plus 1, you get 47.8, let's say. But you win the state, you have the most votes in the state, you win all the electoral votes. If California is won, if it's a 3-way race and California is won with 40% of the vote, which is kind of close to what Bill Clinton did back in 1992, he gets all of the 55 electoral votes of California. Of course, California had fewer than that back in 1992, but you get the point. Look at Michigan. Trump didn't win Michigan with a majority. He won Michigan by like what, 11,000 votes? Not even that. Less than 11,000 votes, and a couple of people got 250,000 votes as well. And so he wins with a minority, a plurality of the vote, meaning the most votes but under 50%, and he gets all 16 of Michigan's electoral votes. Same with Pennsylvania, same in Wisconsin. So Trump, by winning those 3 states, wins the presidency, even though he had less popular votes in the nation than Hillary Clinton. One little interesting statistic about the 2016 election is that if you take away the 4 million vote margin that Hillary Clinton won California by, so just X off California and just get rid of their 4 million vote margin, then Trump actually wins the other 49 states by 2 million. So literally one state, California, which is large and extremely Democrat, that state alone gave Hillary the national vote, popular vote election. And so that's what the Electoral College does. It doesn't allow you to win just because you win massively in like 1 or 2 areas or a state or a region. It forces you to kind of do better across the country, which tends to moderate the politicians some. All right, so it's a winner take all, except in Maine and Nebraska. Remember, we already talked about this too, but this is a good reminder. They give electoral votes by congressional district, which doesn't really matter much because you're only talking about 1 or 2. Maine actually in 2016 gave 1 electoral vote to Clinton. I'm sorry, to Trump, and then but Hillary won the state, so she got the 2 Senate electoral votes, and then she won the first congressional district of Maine, so she gets that one. So she gets 3, and Trump gets 1. And then Nebraska, Obama did the same thing, and he got like 1, and then the rest of the state was 4 votes for was it McCain or I can't remember if it was 28 with McCain or 2012 with Romney, but compared with now you compare this winner take all versus the national popular vote. The national popular vote really doesn't matter in terms of the presidential election. Most of the time, if you win the Electoral College, you win the national popular vote. But in a really, really, really close election, what matters is the Electoral College. And and that means winning a lot of states. Trump won 30 states in 2016 to Hillary's 20. Hillary's 20 ended up being usually high population states, and her margins were much bigger. So she wins New York, big. She wins California, huge. She wins these large population states, but so she wins the popular vote, but she doesn't win a lot of as many states as Trump. Trump wins low population states, but wins a lot of them. In some states, he wins by small margins, like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So this is the map here from 2016. Just take a note of Maine. Look at the little map of Maine that has green and yellow in the upper right-hand corner. The greenish kind of color, that's the 2nd congressional district. So you see, like, that makes up most of Maine, but it's very rural. You're going to see probably more moose up there than you would people. That 1 congressional district gave 1 vote to Trump because it's not winner take all in Maine. And then this is 2008, so it was against McCain. Sorry, I'd forgotten that. But you see congressional district number 2 on the right-hand side of the map. Obama wins that. And then the rest of the state, though, voted for John McCain. So he wins the 4 other electoral votes. All right, and then a question that just people ask, and it's still debated about Electoral College, is does the Electoral College facilitate or impede democracy? Is it good for democracy to have this kind of Electoral College come into play? And again, it only comes into play when it's super close. Or does it impede or hurt democracy? And there's all sorts of debate on either side of Electoral College. And by the way, you should be ready to argue on that, because I think this is a perfect argumentative essay. Like, should we have the Electoral College, or should we have national popular vote? The thing is, you have to have a constitutional amendment in order to get rid of the Electoral College. And if that's the case, almost none of the small states are going to vote to get rid of the Electoral College. And so therefore, it's unlikely that it'll ever change. Matter of fact, if you look at this map, the Electoral College favors swing states. And states that are partisan are largely ignored. Now, partisan states are states that are won easily by one side or the other. So all the states in red, like, they've voted Republican for like every single election, going back from 2000 to 2016. So with 4 presidential elections, every red state voted every single time for Republicans. And then every blue state always voted Democrat every single time from 2000 to 2016. The states that are yellow, those are the states that voted at least once for one of the candidate, one party or the other. So those are what we call swing states. And here's the thing, Texas, well, maybe not in 2020, but every Republican knows they're going to win Nebraska or South Dakota or North Dakota or Wyoming. They don't go there and elect. They don't go there. They're going to spend their time in Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. So every Democrat knows they're going to win California. So unless they're doing a fundraiser to get money from rich people in California, they're not going to California. They're going to spend time in Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin and Iowa, because those are swing states. What that tends to do is the states that are close in Republican and Democrat, they tend to be a little more moderate. And so the candidates have to kind of appeal, their message has to appeal to a more moderate part of America. And that's the one, kind of positive aspect, or at least, some people think it's positive, is that it moderates some of the politics a little bit, but because swing states are appealed to. Whereas if you had national popular vote, Democrats would want to run up the vote in California, and Republicans would want to run up the vote in Alabama. And that may be totally different in how you run a campaign. In a state that's close, like Ohio, ignore it. Why go to it? You might only win it by 5,000 votes. It's not worth it. Go to a state where you can run up the tally, and that's actually going to help, because you want to win the popular vote. So really, strategy changes entirely if you have national popular vote versus Electoral College, and then for good or bad. I mean, but it changes it. All right, what last thing here on this 5.13, incumbency advantage. We already talked about incumbency, so this is again going to be a review card mostly, but we're applying it specifically to the president of the United States. All right, so remember, an incumbent, and if you don't want to write this because you know this, like you could have told me as soon as you saw incumbent, you thought someone who already holds office. If you already knew that, don't write this. But an incumbent, just to remember, is an official currently holding office. It's the person currently holding office. So 2012, President Obama. 2020, President Trump. 2004, President Bush. They're the incumbent. By the way, just a little history. Most presidents win re-election since 1916. Most presidents win re-election since 1916. So if you go back 100 years, if you are the incumbent, you are highly likely to win. In fact, only Hoover in 32, Ford in 1976, and I starred Ford because he is an incumbent, but like he had never won the election because Nixon resigned. He hadn't even been elected vice president because Spiro Agnew, Nixon's vice president, had resigned in disgrace. And so like Ford's kind of a weird case. Carter, 1980, and Bush in 92. Those four presidents were running for re-election and they lost. And they're the only ones in the last 100 years. By the way, they all had something in common. The economy was bad. The economy was not good. Of those, Ford was the closest to winning, lost by a couple percent. But Hoover, Carter, and Bush in 92 lost by 5 or 6% or more. And then all the winners are Wilson, Coolidge, Roosevelt 3 times. Isn't that crazy? Truman, Eisenhower, Johnson, Nixon, Reagan, Clinton, Bush the second, and then Obama. All of them won re-election. So you can see that it's much more likely that a president wins re-election than they lose. And why? Well, there's an advantage. Name recognition. Okay, these are just all the incumbency advantages that we've already talked about. Name recognition, fundraising. They know everybody. They can get money. Media attention. Media pays attention to the president rather than the challenger. Lack of a primary opponent. So like while if you're sitting president, you don't really have a primary opponent most of the time, so you don't have to spend all that money on primaries. Whereas the other side, your challenger has to spend a lot of money to win the primaries. So you end up with a money advantage there. Aura of the office. So like just being president like gives you like this aura. You're flying in on Air Force One and you just seem like you're in charge, and there's like an aura to it that kind of helps people vote for the president. And lastly, voter risk aversion. FDR, when he won during World War II, it was always like, well, you don't change a horse in midstream like when you're in a war. So we better keep the president. So people just reelected Roosevelt because of the threat of World War II and then actually being in World War II. So voters just like, if things are good, let's not mess with a good thing. If things are bad, then maybe we need to switch up. And so that's what you see with the people that have lost. We'll see what happens in 2020. All right, awesome. That is what we're talking about here with incumbency advantages, and that's end of this lesson. Practice.